how children learn better in small classes, and the classes are either at capacity or over for first grade at DFS. Barbara Voigt wrote about kindergarten and first grade. And then Amit Sukram wrote just about kindergarten, that they're getting at capacity and they would like another section. Jessica Stephen Kauser wrote in support of later start time. She really wants this done before her kids are in middle school. Kaylee Zaworski wrote for us to reconsider the decision to take out the bus aid for Booth Hill Route 6. There have been numerous instances of trouble and the parents are worried. Jordan Frederick and Elizabeth Minchala reached out to ask about rules regarding the new kindergarten age and requirement to start kindergarten this year. Scott Kerr wrote to follow up on making Narcan more accessible in different parts of the schools. He wrote there are opportunities for any teen or adult to get free kits and Narcan training through TPOD. Between TPOD and Dr. Semmel, they are going to work it out with the school safety team. And that's it.
Thank you. Public comment is next. We have two speakers. Our first speaker is Aisha Farz. Bill?
There's nobody here by that name online. Jennifer Clayton has raised her hand. I'm not sure if that's the right person, but I'll bring them in.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board and just to stress the email that my husband and I both sent earlier about advocating for another first grade classroom.
Could you please state your name? Thank you.
Yes, Jennifer Clayton. My daughter will be in first grade, going into first grade this year in Daniels Farm Schools.
And your address, please?
We are on Beacon Hill Road in Trumbull.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board and just stress the importance of having an additional kindergarten and first grade classroom specifically. Elowen was in a 22 kid classroom for kindergarten, and she's here with me. 7 o'clock is a tough time for having these meetings with bedtime approaching for getting ready for the school year. But I appreciate the opportunity to just stress the importance of having an additional classroom. We don't want to stress our teachers out. Daniels Farm and Trumbull have exceptional opportunities for teachers and for students to have a high caliber classroom, and to have 22 students with no paras in first grade, I think is a mistake across the board. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to voice that here over Zoom and also through my email. So thank you. I hope that will make a difference in the decisions that are taking place for the first grade classroom for Daniels Farm.
Thank you. Bill, is Aisha Farz here?
It does not appear so.
I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Just wanted to be sure. Okay. The next speaker is Irene Dio.
Good evening, Superintendent Semmel and members of the Board of Education. My name is Irene Dio, and I live on 42 Skating Pond Road. I'm a mother of twins that will be entering first grade at Daniels Farm Elementary School. I'm here tonight to express my deep concern about the overcrowding in our first grade classrooms and to formally request the creation of an additional first grade class. Overcrowded classrooms hinder students' learning. An additional first grade class will alleviate overcrowding and improve learning outcomes. Benefits are that it will improve students' achievement, better teacher-student interaction, and a more positive learning environment. Research suggests that small class sizes and lower student-teacher ratio benefits students' achievement. Student-teacher ratios of less than 18:1 show greater academic achievement in grades K through third grade. Small class sizes contribute to more individualized attention for each student, but the smaller classes are easier for helping the teachers navigate behavioral challenges. Small classes in elementary schools and allow students to develop essential social skills and confidence to help them succeed later in life. As a mom of a child with learning disability, this resonates to me the most. My daughter, even though she receives top-notch level of services at school for her disability, when she returns into her classroom setting, she's regressed. The number of students in her class, especially with the big personalities, often are overlooked, the classrooms, while the kids who are soft-spoken students are impacted. Similar experiences are also occurring in my son's class as well. I would like to personally thank Principal Kay and his amazing teachers and school specialists for doing an incredible job. Not many schools will be able to accomplish what they have done under these settings. The only solution that I see is hiring an additional first grade teacher. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Okay. Next is the superintendent report, please. Oh, that's who's calling? Is there a person here that's named Aisha Farz? No, thank you. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
All right, well, it's the eve of the beginning of the school year. That's, as we look at this board meeting, we have, I think it's about 14 more days, Mr. Congdon, before we come back with our students, which we're definitely excited to have our students come back. So my first part is just to talk about the hiring process. Specifically, we, as of today, have only one open certified position to fill. And that actual position is being filled this week. So we already have the person, we just don't have them fully signed and ready to go. So we've hired 29 certified staff members starting this spring and finishing now. While other districts may be struggling to find high quality staff members, we are definitely ready for the start of the school year. I do believe that we are seen as a district of choice because we have a strong focus, strong clarity, and have a high accountability for our district. Moreover, our staff is very caring and they're instructional experts. And all this effort has resulted in high achievement for our students, and not just academically, but for the whole child. And we recognize that there's always going to be work to be done. And we always need to continue to work harder and try to get better at our craft. But we do that so that we can make sure that we have better outcomes for our students. So I do want to make sure I thank our building leaders and anybody who supported our building principals during the hiring process to fill all 29 of these certified positions, and our HR department led by Joe Cella for attracting a high quality and a very diverse pool of candidates, and to bring those candidates through a rigorous process to ensure that our students have excellent teachers so that they can learn and grow. But I'm definitely excited. I think we're going to see articles again this year where there's going to be districts with 10, 15, 20 positions, perhaps more, that they can't fill. So we're fortunate here that we attract a lot of high quality candidates who want to come teach here, be a part of the teaching and learning process. Facilities wise, we've been very busy improving a number of our sites this summer. Booth Hill families, if they've been driving by the school, will have seen a new roof being placed on there. We understand it should be done before the start of the school year. It's the same company that put on Middlebrook's roof the year before, and they were done, high-level professionals who got it done on time and actually under budget. The paving project at Tashua is complete. And I talked to Dr. Wheeler today about TechEc. If you remember, the TechEc team, all the parents had made some very significant donations to the TechEc playground. So they're only in the middle of the process of like ripping up the stuff. So if you've driven down there, it looks a little tough right now, but they're now going to be able to start putting it together. So I'm excited for that piece. And then, of course, the McDougall complex is our biggest project for this summer, but I know Ms. Timpanelli is going to share some information there, so I won't steal any thunder there. So that's the end of the superintendent's report at this point.
Thank you. Do we have the picture that you could put up, Michelle, so people can look? Is it back there? Yes, good. Okay. All right, I'm going to look at it so I can see. All right, and I can explain to you. Okay, this is McDougal Field. The field is done right now. And what they did was they put extra drainage in because we were having trouble with water on the field last year and the year before. So they put all the drains in. Now they also, the D zones around the side, you see how there's a line and then there's the half circle? That's what they call the D zones. These are going to be also AstroTurf, so we don't have to mow them anymore. So everything, I'm sure they're all happy about that they don't have to mow lawns anymore up there. So the last thing that they're doing this week, and it's a good weather week, is they will be doing the track. And this is very important for everyone out there. Please do not come to Trumbull Field to walk around the track because they have to install and they have to let whatever they're putting down there set. And if you walk on there, it'll be a footprint that'll be there permanently. So we don't want to see that. So if you could just refrain from entering the field until this is complete, we would appreciate that. So if all goes well, that should be done this week, hopefully. That was the prediction by Mike King. And I want to thank him for inviting me to come and look at it and explaining to me all the different things that they've done. They will be putting up a fence on the outside. That probably will happen next year. Okay, so thank you, Mr. King. And moving on, that is the end of my report. Okay, next, reports and action items, the approval of the Educator and Leader Evaluation Support Plan. Dr. Iwaniki.
Thank you so much. So I know that we just brought to you the Educator and Leader Evaluation and Support Plan and the overview changes. We submitted it to the State Department and they got back to us and asked us to make a few small changes, which we wanted to share with you this evening. Our committee met over the summer to examine those specific changes. And Paula Texera, who couldn't be here this evening, but did participate in the edits from the original committee, Nick Banks, Gina Prisco, Peter Sullivan, Ellen Spark, and myself, we all got together to make these different changes that were suggested. We looked at them to see if the feedback was a legal requirement or if it was just a suggestion from the state and if it was in line with Trumbull practices. And we were really pleased because the suggestions were very small for the most part. So those main focus of those revisions were new terms and language or clarification. So for example, in Trumbull, we have had for many years, the DCs are supervisors, and the state was wondering why we weren't referring to them as just administrators. So they asked us to put in a little language about them being the difference between a supervisor and a leader or an administrator. They also asked us to make sure that we adjust the levels of support and that we made sure that we had a clarification for leaders, which again is the new state model, is that administrators are called leaders, and what those terms meant within our document. So that first piece is the new terms and language. For example, here is one of the suggestions that they asked us to do, which we did. We had the phrase measures of accomplishment and indicators of growth. They wanted it to say multiple measures of student learning growth and achievement. And for leaders, multiple measures of organizational growth, health, leader and educational growth, and impact on student learning, growth, and achievement. There was some legal compliance verbiage. For example, the state law says that you must have an orientation each fall. We called it a fall meeting, so we changed it to orientation. They wanted it to say tiered support in the document in one place, so we added that in. So you can see these are very small, not really changing the document, but mostly linguistic changes. They also wanted us to ensure that feedback was included in multiple sections of the document. These are just some examples of where we changed those titles, but again, very small changes. They also asked us to adjust our tiered levels of supports and make sure that we didn't have the word plan on each one of those, that it's a support. It's not an actual plan until the person has received 3 levels of support, and then they go on a corrective action plan. So we made that small change as well. And this just shows that a plan that's supposed to be a support model so that initially it's for all educators and leaders, as we discussed last time, that at an intermediate level, you might have a peer coach involved, and that at the intense level, that's where it would really be a concern that you'd involve the union. And then they also asked us if we would consider adding a corrective action plan sample. We took the state's model and we added in a sample corrective action plan as well. And then we made sure that administrator said leader in each one of those, and that we added the clarification as supervisors, as I mentioned earlier. So all in all, we feel that the changes are still respectful to the core of our document, and we are pleased that we'll be able to have this evaluation plan in place next year for continuous learning and feedback. That's really what the emphasis of the plan is, to make sure that teachers and administrators are focused on how are students being impacted in their learning, but also how am I developing professionally in my growth as an educational expert or as a leader expert in the field, and really just making sure that we're growing each year for the sake of students, so that it's impacting students in their achievement and in their personal growth. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to say a little bit about this process.
I'm John Evans. I'm one of the teacher representatives. I was actually in sunny Florida at the time that many of the revisions happened over the summer. So Nick Banks stepped in. I spoke to Dr. Iwaniki during that time. And, what I can see is what I really enjoy about the revisions is we don't really see it as that any of the suggestions from the state really changed our vision at all. We felt like what we were able to do was incorporate the revisions to kind of clarify our vision and tighten things up here and there. But overall, just like throughout the past school year, it was a very collaborative process. Everybody was in communication throughout. And we're proud of what we were able to put together and what changes we accepted from the state for this.
I think John really hit the nail on the head when he said that this didn't do anything to change our vision for what we wanted this to be. So it really boiled down to, if you caught on, there's a lot of just language with semantics and the state wanting very precise language in certain cases, which we fixed. Because other than that, it was really to reassure all involved in the process that when before we called it tiered support, tiered, that probably sounded too remedial, or it mirrored language of what you would, have for a struggling student. So it made sense to us for this switch to not only that they're called levels of support, but there's 3 different levels long before anyone would be put on anything that's called a plan. And if you saw on one of those slides, it's even at level 3, where all involved would be very clear about, something has risen to the level of a concern. And if we don't, we're going to work together to try to solve that, or there might be a need to go to an official plan, which is called a corrective action plan. So I know that the last time we talked about this, there was sort of questions and confusion about, who's on a plan and at what point. But, just to summarize, part of the reason why this was such a respectful process and a collaborative process is that having TAA representation at the table along with TEA, both sides were very comfortable with, what this meant, and how no one at any point would be, taken by surprise by the fact that there's concerns from an administrator about their performance. If anything, we took what we had before, a great plan. We did what we had to do because of what the state said. But if anything, we've put, more in terms of supports in place for teachers, because then final thought would be, actually, Dr. Iwaniki summarized it nicely for all of the administrators earlier today at our workshop, saying that this is all about now, educator growth. How do we work together to make sure that each and every year, both administrators and teachers have an agreed upon plan that's going to, produce results where, that affect the teaching and learning. But it's something that's, not threatening at all or anything like that. So, any questions?
Thanks, Peter.
So that is the overview of the changes.
Okay.
And we're just seeking the board's approval to make those linguistic changes that we've discussed this evening.
Okay, I'm going to need a motion, please.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the TPS Educator and Leader Evaluation and Support Plan with summer revisions.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions for the team? Did a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your work. Next, the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting. I'm going to need a motion, please. What, put the,
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the July 9th regular meeting of the Board of Education.
A second?
thank you. Okay, anyone with a question on those or, yes, anybody? No? Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Personnel report, Dr. Semmel.
All right, so if you look at the personnel report, the lengthy portion of this is all of the certified positions that we've hired since our last meeting. So those are just put there so you can see the information. The resignations, there's 3 for tonight. We have Lisa Napoli, special education teacher at Madison Middle School, resigning effective July 31st. We have Ryan O'Keefe, a special education teacher at Madison Middle School, resigning effective July 29th. And we have Kenneth Riley, science teacher at Trumbull High School, resigning effective July 31st, 2024. And we recommend you accept these resignations.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the resignations of Lisa Napoli, special education teacher at Madison Middle School, Ryan O'Keefe, special education teacher at Madison Middle School, and Kenneth Riley, science teacher at Trumbull High School.
I need
Second.
a second. Thank you. Anyone with a comment or a question? No? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passes. Thank you.
And I'll just reiterate that all 3 of those positions, one of them is in the final stages, but they're all already taken care of,
Okay,
So-
thank you.
if you were wondering.
Okay, next, Dr. Semmel, enrollment.
All right, so are going to talk about enrollment now, and I know we have some friends in the audience who also were here to talk about enrollment. And I'll go through some of the highlights and go through some of the specific grades as well and talk about my recommendations at this point. So first, I would like to start by acknowledging, and I think I'm speaking for the entire board, that we all prefer smaller class sizes to larger class sizes. I don't think there's very many educators who would argue that we would prefer larger class sizes. But at the same time, we have to look at the math and the numbers about it as well. And I'll go through some of those tonight. So when a section does go over the recommended guideline, we also have to recognize that we don't immediately just add a teacher. Because if we did that, you'd be adding 9 teachers. Well, you'd be adding probably 5 teachers tonight because we have a few sections that go over the guideline. So we know that we can't just simply hire a teacher when a section goes over a guideline. It would be wildly expensive for the board and the taxpayers if we do that. So therefore, we must monitor class sizes across the district and make logical decisions about what is best for teaching and learning in combination with the restraints of the budget. So I'll share more about some of that as we get into some of the specifics about what some of those options could be. So one of the things we always start by looking at is the kindergarten numbers. If you recall, last time we spoke quite a bit about kindergarten, and there was some discussion about Jane Ryan and Daniels Farm kindergarten numbers. We didn't think that they would achieve the 4th section, and we decided that that was no longer going to be necessary. So as we look now at the numbers for kindergarten, we see that many of the projections we made back in October, keep in mind, it's October of 23, when we were putting these numbers together. So we use folks like NESDEC. We also use the folks who helped us develop the master plan, because don't forget, with kindergarten, there was the whole thing about the Burr babies, the babies born in September, October, November, and December, that they needed to go through an additional process to be allowed to start kindergarten. So there was a number of complications and more challenges, but when you look at them, Certainly Daniels Farm did not get to the number that we expected for kindergartners, but remember last year they overachieved. There was a lot of kindergartners. And they're all first graders. They're going to be coming in the current year. Frenchtown, though, is getting close to the number projected. Jane Ryan's close. Middlebrook is exactly at the projected as we stand here. And Tashua is getting closer to that number as well. So in terms of kindergarten, I think we've made some good choices, and I think we're in a good spot as it relates to kindergarten. So going into the actual elementary schools specifically, a couple of things, and we talked about this in July. One of the hot spots we've been paying attention to is grade 2 over at Booth Hill. Now, I can tell you, because these numbers do change sometimes, that 93 is not actually 93, it's 92. And it's not because an error was made, it's just there's a person moving into a different part of Trumbull, but when we ran this report, they still belong to Booth Hill. So just for being transparent, the number is 93 until that move happens. So that would mean that with the guideline of 22, you have sections of 4 sections of 23 at that point. And when it comes to Booth Hill, I spoke to Mr. Chase again, and we agreed that in a perfect world, if there was no size limitations and budget was not an issue, then adding a section would be great. Because again, smaller class sizes are certainly not going to hurt the children unless you get down to class sizes of 1, then it gets lonely in there. The Board of Ed, though, in terms of options that we've talked about, one of the things that the Board of Ed has pushed very hard over the past few years is making sure we have 2 literacy coaches at least and 1 math coach at every elementary school. And through the work with the Board of Finance, the Town Council, the First Selectman, we were able to keep those positions for all the elementary schools. And in speaking with Mr. Chase, we talked about the fact that makes up a big part of his leadership team. So he's able to work with the literacy coaches and the math coaches to make sure that the classrooms that need support, that need additional support, he can use the resources he has at his disposal to go in and support those classes. So currently we feel that given those numbers, those extra literacy support, not extra, but those literacy support teachers and math coaches can continue to support whether it be the grade 2 classrooms, if those are classrooms that need that additional support, or any other classrooms. That's one of the roles of those literacy teachers and math. At the same time, we also know that Booth Hill has a space issue. We know that if we were to add a section at Booth Hill, you're going to take the art room, and he's looked at the art room and he says, this is not really conducive to good instruction. It's not designed like the other classroom. So it's not really appropriate for that. So that's another reason why that's not the best idea. However, if the numbers do continue to rise or we see a significant need for an additional pair of hands, then we'll certainly entertain the idea of adding additional building subs or classrooms paras to support those particular classrooms. So that is what I would recommend as we stay with Booth Hill with the 4 sections for that grade level. And I'm also going to put out a couple of other numbers. There are 523 students at Booth Hill with 24 sections. So there's 523. It's the biggest elementary school currently. And sometimes that honor switches hands from one school to the other, but Booth Hill's been the biggest for a couple of years. Now, Daniels Farm grade 1 is obviously another section that we paid a lot of attention to. This last year, the entire year, it remained at guideline for the entire year. So the board says the guideline is 22 students in grade 1, and there was a total of 88 students. So, and over the summer, though, we have seen it slowly creep up. So there now are 23 students in 3 of the sections and 22 in 1 of the sections. And of course, we have heard from some parents who've received a number of emails. Ms. Newland read off a number of the parents who had read or wrote into the board and to myself to request the fifth section. So you've heard that, and you've also heard a couple of public commenters tonight. Again, though, Daniels Farm does have 2 literacy coaches and the math coach. Now, they have a total of 477 students. So, and 22 sections. So they actually have 2 less sections at Booth Hill and 477 students, about 50 less students. So the literacy teachers and math coach at Daniels Farm actually will have could have even or add more support to classrooms that would need additional support. So they have that greater opportunity. We all know that Mr. K does a wonderful job. He's an excellent principal over at Daniels Farm and advocates for those students and for the teachers. And we know that under his leadership, he's going to work very hard and very smart to make sure that the classrooms that need support, he's going to make sure that happens. He's going to work with his literacy team. He's going to work with his teachers. He's going to make sure that they get that support. Again, similar to Booth Hill, if the numbers continue to rise or we see significant need for an additional pair of hands, we need to keep an open mind about, moving forward. I'm not an expert in real estate, but I think there's some winds of change happening in terms of real estate. And typically, I think you see a lot of houses go on the market in April, May, and people try to move during that time. I'm wondering if we're going to see more house sales that go later into the year than typical. There was 29, at least through Zillow's perspective, there was 29 houses for sale in Trumbull. So I have no idea who's going to buy those houses and move into them. But we have to pay attention to our numbers. Speaking of numbers, though, I think another thing we really have to pay attention to is our budget. One of the things that the Board of Education has been tasked with, and especially Jackie Norcell as the finance chair has heard this over and over again, is that the Board of Education had this extra money in these different accounts. And now that I've been here 4 years, we've been working very hard to try to wring out any of that extra money that might be there in order to make sure we didn't have to lay off staff. So we've been very efficient in trying to pay very close attention to our budget numbers. For example, there's a line in your budget called staff turnover. And it's the line that accounts for when a more experienced teacher retires or leaves us at a higher pay rate and replaced potentially by a lower salaried person, that's a turnover. And you might get savings on that. In the past budgets, you've had $300,000 in that line item. But as Paul and myself and now Mr. Cella, we've been examining that, we've been increasing that to the point that we increased it to $750,000 this year, which made my stomach turn a little bit because if you don't hit that number, you're already starting the year in deficit. Well, I've been asking strongly for Mr. Cella and Mr. Hendrickson to finish that document for today so I'd have a better understanding of where that staff turnover number is. And even with those 2 kindergarten teachers that we didn't provide this year, we're at $742,000 of staff turnover savings because you don't always hire a new teacher at a lesser rate. With some of these hard to fill positions, you could pay more. So the document at this point is a savings of $742,000. So we don't have any additional money. And if we did, I would just tell you that, yep, that money is available. So our budget's tighter and you can't just hire a new teacher without understanding that there's consequences for that, which means you'd already be behind in the budget. On top of that, and I'm going to keep saying this, excess cost is a real unknown. The fact that the state is not fully funding excess cost, and it's been going from 72% reimbursement rate for very expensive students, our district, down to 67% last year, sorry. Who knows what that number is going to be? Because we're not promised anything. And so I saw Ms. Tesoro here. I think she's here somewhere. I'm going to keep telling her throughout the process, if they come in with too low of a number, we're going to have to go for a special allocation because these are big dollars, right? When you don't get the percentage, we're talking short 200, 300, 400, $500,000. And I haven't seen the state yet say anything about starting to fund that excess cost at a better rate. In fact, I think it's moving more and more obligations from the state to the taxpayers because it's, oh, sorry, we're not paying it. State law doesn't actually really require it. Oh, you guys have to pick up the bill. It's an aside, but it's something that the board is going to have to really pay attention to. And we won't even know that number until January and March, early February. It's terrible. We've been emailing our state legislators, but that's a scary thing to have a potential major shortfall in your budget, and we have to be prepared for that. So overspending now on August 13th and starting to deficit spend on August 13th, I can't recommend it. Would I want smaller class sizes? Absolutely. In fact, in my own district, when my kid was in probably first or second grade, like 18 years ago, I was using I could tell someone was referring to the STAR study, which was done a long time ago, but it suggests 18 students is like ideal. But our own guideline is 22. And again, it's not a hard and fast number. So would I love to recommend here and say, absolutely, just add the section, add it for Booth Hill, add it for Daniels Farm. I would love to be able to do that. But knowing that we have to pay attention to our budget, and knowing that other classes in our district are more over the guideline, I cannot recommend that tonight. I do not see that as the optimal decision as we stand here. But also at the same time, I remain open-minded because as things change, we might have to really look at that because there probably is a tipping point at some point in there. So I've said a lot about that. I just think it's important to know where my mindset is, and it's not just a simple yes or no. There's a number of other elements connected to that. So that's why with the Daniels Farm number, them being at 91, like I said, it's 23. I think we need to continue to monitor that. We know Mr. K is going to do an excellent job with his team to support those classes. We also know that the other classes are very reasonable, the other class sizes. So we're in good shape the rest of Daniels Farm. So they'll be able to put more focus and emphasis on grade 1. Frenchtown and Jane Ryan are both good. Like these are the numbers that don't make me stay up at night because these are nice, perfect numbers. They fit beautifully into the box. So Frenchtown is in good shape. Jane Ryan is in good shape in terms of their sections. Middlebrook's an interesting one. We've talked about it again in grade 2. I don't know what happened in grade 1 and grade 2 in Trumbull, but we have these higher sections. In any event, we've heard from Ms. Ponte that since they house SRP over at Middlebrook and Frenchtown, but at Middlebrook, that there's a number of those children in grade 2 that don't spend their entire day in grade 2. And therefore that 91 looks a little bit more inflated than what the actual teachers will be dealing with for most of their day. They'll be getting other support in other locations through the rest of the day. Over at Tashua, you do have their grade 5 has one section at 26. So they have a 26, 25, 25. And again, I would just continue to monitor that. Going over by 1 on the guideline, is it optimal? Probably not optimal, but adding a $80,000 teacher or a $50,000 para, that's a budget consideration. And if you start adding paras to 1, you have to be prepared to start adding them to all over the place. So it's not just do it for 1 school. You have to be thinking about the big picture when it comes to all that. So then we look at a summary. Really, I didn't do any additional analysis here. I think I spoke enough about that. But it is interesting that when you look at our class sizes, you see 386 kindergartners this year. I think that could go up a little bit more. It went up last year from this time to the start of school, but I don't think it's going to put any sections at risk. But we will continue to pay attention. But you do see a decline in the number of students in the classes. But we've also seen our middle schools kind of get bigger. And like we said last time, we think it's because perhaps people buying houses in Trumbull right now have older kids. It's not I don't have a lot of science behind that, but our numbers do seem to indicate that. But it could reverse, especially since out of the 29 houses, I saw houses that were more affordable than I saw a couple of months ago. I saw houses in the $400,000 to $600,000 range, and affordability is a tough thing to talk about, but there could be additional people moving in August and September, and perhaps it's a later emigration into, I'm not using the right word, but, migration into Trumbull later. Most parents like to try to be situated and established before the start of the school year, but maybe that changes this year because of the economics and how interest rates have caused some consternation. And then the 6 through 12, you see the numbers. Middle schools are both bigger. I mean, Hillcrest is almost 800 and Madison Middle School's 835. And the high school is just slightly different from the previous year, mostly because the outgoing class was slightly bigger than the incoming class. But one other notice that we had is, for some reason this year over at Booth Hill, we had a significant number of students come in from one of the private elementary schools, one of the Catholic elementary schools, which I was trying to do a little investigation into. I don't know all the reasons why, but when you get 8 students new to a building and all of their the school that they're coming from is the same private elementary school, it made me scratch my head just a little bit about what's going on there. But it did increase Booth Hill's enrollment a little bit from that. So that's the enrollment. I know certainly parents who are listening, especially from Daniel's Farm, who are hoping we're going to add a section. I can't recommend that addition based on the things I said. I do understand where they're coming from. I do. And as a parent of 3 children myself, I get that. And I'd argue the same way as a parent. But looking at the whole thing, that's what I've mentioned is what I have to recommend tonight. So basically, I'm not recommending any changes to your current structure. So that's the update that I had to provide.
Dr. Semmel, can I ask one question?
Of
What
course.
about, I hear a lot about electricity costs. Is that going to affect us also?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, boy, anybody who's looking at their July bill is seeing that public benefit. I mentioned that ECR seems like they're trying to tax individual property owners through ECR now. And now it feels like that public piece and Eversource and United Illuminating are doing a big job making sure they're saying like, hey, this isn't us. Like, we're just showing you where the cost comes from. But, if you've read enough in the newspapers, it's from a variety of sources, including the 10-year deal with the Millstone Power. So I would guess that our electricity costs are going to be higher than we put into our budget, because it's going to be higher at my house. And I'm pretty sure it's going to, what is it, a 10-month, I think, situation where they say it's going to be elevated. So that's going to be the majority of our school year where we're drawing that power. I don't know exactly the numbers, but if some of us are seeing 10%, 20% increases in our electricity, we might see that in the schools. So great question.
Anyone with a question for him? Yes.
This is just more of a comment. So I want also people to realize I really like small class sizes too, but our facilities can't really handle it. Like, we would have to have no art classroom in one school, maybe no music classroom in another school. So I just want parents to be aware that this 10-year plan is coming up, and it's going to be up to you guys to vote and decide what you guys want. And if you want facilities that can fit the population we have to move forward, because we can't wait till a brick falls on a kid's head and gets them hurt. God forbid, it's one of our children.
We don't have bricks falling.
We don't, but I'm saying the schools are older.
They
and
are older and
they-
they are expensive
Yeah.
to maintain.
So,
They are.
and they also weren't configuring for the type of learning we do now. There were no special ed classrooms, there were no PT or OT. So I just want parents to be very aware of that when they're voting, because this is going to affect the student body for the next 20 years probably. So we just want to make sure we're on top of that, because some of the decisions with staff is just that there's nowhere to put anybody else.
Especially at Booth Hill, correct.
So thank you. That was my
Thank you.
soapbox.
Anyone else? Just talking here, Jeff, so they could hear you, please.
Marty, an excellent report and, good giving us many ideas of, which way we could go if we have to. So I appreciate that. And I myself, having been a principal in town, I know how important it is to have small classes. Now that I sit here, I know how important it is to watch the budget and look at the other sides of the things we have to do. The whole idea is, I think you had a very balanced approach for us to look at. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Dr. Semmel, looking at the overall summary for grades K through 5, the kindergarten, you mentioned we see a considerable drop. Could that be attributed to the new age cutoff? And are we paying close attention to that and preparing for what that number might be next fall?
We are. It's actually, I believe, 56 of our, they're lovingly called Burr babies because of the month they were born in, but 56 of our kindergartners are Burr babies. But we typically see about, I think Ms. Heffley told me about 90 because I was asking these questions. We usually see about 90 Burr babies. So I think I told her we need to really pay attention to this. So one of the things we have to pay attention to is the state going to say, you can't do any more beyond September 1st. But we have to look at it too, because we worked with Dr. Wheeler. We're not allowing any children into Tech Ec who are not 3 by September 1st. So from a pre-K program, we're saying we don't want to put a child in pre-K that then may not be able to matriculate into kindergarten when they were expecting. So we're saying all new pre-K students are coming in. We've worked with Mr. Catalano on that too. You have to be born by September 1st. So in a couple of years, all of our pre-K kids from Tech Ec will all be of age to start kindergarten. But we will continue to pay attention to that. And maybe 30 of that delta between last year's class and this year's class could be attributed to that. That is definitely a educated guess.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Dr. Semmel, for the
You're welcome.
report. We understand. Thank you very much. I'm going to leave you up there. Back. Yes, we're going to do the bylaws.
You want the agenda, the recommendation afterwards.
Do it after.
So just quickly, the Board of Ed packet that was shared with the Board of Ed members and the public contains updates to the Board of Ed bylaws. You've had a chance to review those changes and ask questions. And as a reminder, our Board of Ed leadership, Mrs. Timpanelli, Mrs. Norcell, worked with our legal representative, Mr. Floyd Dugas, when making these changes and making these recommendations. And one of the big changes in the updated bylaws aligns our public comment process with the process that the town council uses. So I would request that you make a motion to adopt the updated bylaws as presented.
Thank you. Jackie?
Yeah, I make a motion to review and approve the recommended changes to policy code 9312.
I second.
Thank you. Anyone with a question for Dr. Semmel? Okay, all in favor?
Oh,
Yes.
I just wanted to say that regarding that policy change, I just want everybody to know that we're always available, phone calls, email, we don't want to feel like we're not available to you, but sometimes people come up and it's not even about anything we have control over. So that is, I just want you to know, my email especially, I'm always available, and I know they all feel the same way. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you, Dr. Semmel.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, because with your bylaws, typically when Dr. Iwaniki comes up to talk about policy, it requires 2 readings, but your bylaws specifically state that on any particular meeting, you could vote a change to the bylaws with a 2/3 vote. So I just want to make sure in terms of just your rules that you are following your rules, even though it's slightly different than what you normally do other policy.
We followed our rules. Thank you. Okay, next is our financials. We're going to start, Mrs. Marcel.
Yes, the Finance Committee of the Board of Education met on August 8th, 2024. And some of our top things that we were going to talk about was to review the fiscal year at the end of the 23-24. And then to look at A second thing, which was very important, we reviewed the reevaluation to use our non-lapsing account function to make any changes and adjustments to the fiscal 23-24 year, which was necessary after other items. And Paul will walk us through it so that I'm sure you read it, but this way you can understand the changes and why we have these intra-fund transfers.
Yes, last Thursday, we covered these two items. As Jackie mentioned, the board reviews and approves similar transfers each year in August. As part of the approved 23-24 budget, almost the last line in the budget is intergovernmental transfers, and that totaled $703,852. And that was to balance the budget. And that consists of transfers from athletics for $300,000, E-rate for $100,000, magnet school transportation grant of $66,300, and a draw on the non-lapsing account for $435,552, totaling $901,852. However, that is offset by transfers to Elite of $48,000 and strings and band of $150,000. So that totals to the $703,852. However, in reviewing the year-end financials, they only required a non-lapsing account draw of $58,535.03 to zero out the budget. So before you is the request to make these transfers. The non-lapsing account draw was $377,016.97 less than anticipated. This is due largely to the freeze that we put on earlier in the year, and also the great teamwork we had throughout the district between department heads and principals for closing out purchase orders that were no longer needed, freeing up available balance. So that is the summary on that proposal. And as Jackie indicated, there is a resolution before you that deals with using the non-lapsing account. Each year, the business office has to make post-closing accounting adjustments. And these are mostly for invoices from the prior year, that being 23-24, for goods and services that were provided during that year, but may have not yet been invoiced out from those vendors. So the business office is requesting this resolution be approved to make such adjustments from the non-lapsing account. And I will update both the board and the superintendent from time to time as to how much of that non-lapsing account may be needed.
Okay, thank you.
Lucinda has to ask for two separate motions, one for the fiscal year and one for the resolution.
Okay, so we'll do.
Madam
the
Chair,
fiscal-
I move that we approve the fiscal year end 2023-2024 interfund transfers as presented.
I need a second. Allison, do you second it? Good. Okay. Any questions on the fiscal year? Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that passes. Next motion, please.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the following resolution. Resolved that the Finance Committee of the Trumbull Board of Education approves the use of the non-lapsing account to make any accounting adjustments for fiscal year 2023-2024, which are not encumbered and are received after June 30th, 2024. The business administrator will inform the Finance Committee of the total amount of non-lapsing account funds that are expended.
I need a second.
I second that.
Thank you. Any questions on this motion? No? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. That is good. Anything else?
Madam Chair, I make the motion to adjourn.
I need
Make
a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye, and good night.
Good night. Thank you for listening.